Ladies, we all know the everything is fine smile. We wear it at church. We wear it at PTA meetings. But when your daughter wears it, while her husband stands 3 inches behind her, that's not a smile. That's a hostage video. Tonight's story is about a mother who got a text saying, "I love you, don't come over." She didn't listen, and by the time she was done with her son-in-law, he was wishing he'd sent a text to the police instead. Hello, ladies. Mary here. There is a specific kind of intuition that mothers possess. It isn't magic and it isn't psychic ability. It is data analysis. You spend decades studying a person from the moment they take their first breath. You know the cadence of their walk, the pitch of their laugh, and the rhythm of their silence. So when the data changes abruptly, you don't need a crystal ball to know something is wrong. You just need to be paying attention. Tonight's story is about Beatrice, a woman who read a text message and realized that punctuation can be a cry for help. My name is Beatrice, and for 35 years, I made my living finding the lies buried in financial ledgers. I was a forensic accountant. My job was to look at a column of numbers that appeared perfectly balanced and find the one decimal point that proved $1 million had been stolen. I learned early on that people are sloppy criminals. They cover their tracks, but they always leave a pattern. My daughter Chloe is 28. She is vibrant, messy, and loud. She texts in run-on sentences. She uses too many emojis. She calls me B when she is happy and mother when she is annoyed. So when my phone lit up at 11:15 p.m. on a Friday night, the text I received didn't read like a message from my daughter. It read like a press release. Mother, please do not come over this weekend. Richard and I are taking some time for ourselves. We need space to work on our marriage. Please respect our privacy. I love you. I sat up in bed and put on my reading glasses. I stared at the screen. Mother, not B. Please respect our privacy. Chloe had never used that phrase in her life. Chloe was the kind of girl who live-streamed her facials. I didn't reply. I didn't call. A call could be declined. A call could be monitored. I got out of bed. I got dressed. I put on my sensible shoes and my heavy wool coat. I grabbed my car keys and the spare key to Chloe's house that she had given me 3 years ago before she married Richard. Richard, my son-in-law, is a handsome man. He is 35, wears Italian loafers, and calls himself a visionary developer. In my line of work, we have a different word for men like Richard. We call them liabilities. He has charm but no capital. He has ambition but no follow-through. And most dangerously, he has a wife with a substantial trust fund. I drove to their house in the hills. The roads were empty. The GPS said 20 minutes. I made it in 15. I expected the house to be dark. If they were taking time for themselves, as the text claimed, I expected closed curtains and a silent driveway. Instead, the house was blazing with light. There were 4 cars in the driveway. I recognized Richard's BMW. I recognized his mother's ancient Mercedes. The other 2 were unfamiliar. I parked on the street, 2 houses down. I didn't want to announce my arrival with headlights. I walked up the driveway, staying in the shadows of the manicured hedges. I could hear laughter. I stepped onto the porch. I didn't ring the doorbell. I didn't knock. I took out the spare key and slid it into the lock. It didn't turn. I frowned. I tried again. I jiggled it. Nothing. They had changed the locks. That was the second data point. First the sterile text, now the physical barrier. The pattern was forming. And it was ugly. I pressed the doorbell. Ding dong. The laughter inside stopped instantly. It was like someone had cut a wire. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Finally the door opened, but it wasn't Chloe standing there. It was Judith, Richard's mother. Judith is a woman who wears pearls to the grocery store and judges you if you don't. She stood in the doorway, blocking the view inside with her petite cashmere-clad frame. She offered me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Beatrice, she said, her voice dripping with faux surprise. What on earth are you doing here at this hour? I was in the neighborhood, I lied. I thought I'd stop by. Oh, what a shame, Judith said, not moving an inch. You just missed the excitement. We are having a little family dinner, but Chloe. Well, poor Chloe isn't feeling up to visitors, is that so? I asked, because I got a text from her an hour ago saying they needed space. It didn't mention a dinner party. Judith's smile faltered for a millisecond. Well, you know how young people are. Richard thought a nice meal would cheer her up, but she has a migraine. A terrible one. She is resting upstairs, I see, I said. I'll just pop up and check on her. I made a move to step inside. Judith sidestepped to block me. It was a subtle movement but firm. I really wouldn't, Beatrice, she said, her voice hardening. She took a sedative. She is fast asleep. Richard is very protective of her rest right now. She has been emotional lately. Emotional, I repeated, yes. Up and down. You know how it is. At that moment, Richard appeared behind his mother. He was holding a glass of red wine. He looked flushed, happy, and entirely too comfortable for a man whose wife was supposedly incapacitated upstairs. Beatrice, he boomed, flashing his white teeth. Judith, let her in. Don't be rude. Judith stepped aside reluctantly. I walked into the foyer. The house smelled of roast beef and expensive cologne. In the dining room, I saw two other people, Richard's sister and her husband, eating calmly. They looked up at me with bland indifference, but my eyes didn't stay on them. My eyes went to the entry table where Chloe always dropped her things. It was empty. Chloe's purse wasn't there, her keys weren't there, her favorite trench coat, which she wore everywhere in the autumn, wasn't on the hook. Where is she? Richard the first asked. Like Mom said, Richard replied, swirling his wine, she's sleeping it off. Rough week, she's been a little unstable. Unstable, I said. That's a new word. She's been talking crazy, Beatrice. Richard sighed, putting on a mask of concern. Paranoid. Thinking people are against her. We're trying to keep the environment calm. I looked at the dining room table, at the feast, at the laughter I had heard from the driveway. And a dinner party is a calm environment, I asked. Richard's jaw tightened. We are family. We are supporting her. I'm family, I said. I'm going upstairs. I can't let you do that, Richard said. He stepped in front of the staircase. He was 6 feet tall. I am 5'4". He used his height like a weapon. She gave strict instructions. No visitors. Especially you, especially me? She thinks you trigger her episodes, Richard said smoothly. She thinks you are judgmental. She asked me to keep you away for a few days. For her mental health, I stared at him. I looked at his polished shoes. I looked at his relaxed posture. The data didn't match. If Chloe was paranoid and unstable, Richard shouldn't be drinking wine and hosting his sister. He should be worried. He should be at her side. Get out of my way, Richard, I said softly. Go home, Beatrice, he said, his voice dropping an octave. Don't make a scene, you'll only prove her point that you're impossible. I looked past him. Up the stairs. The hallway was dark. And then I heard it. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a cry. It was a rhythmic metallic clink, like a chain hitting a bedpost. Did you hear that? I asked. My voice was low, devoid of the hysteria they were waiting for. Richard didn't blink. Hear what? The wind? It's an old house, Beatrice. Creaks. The pipes rattle. That wasn't a pipe, I said. And that wasn't wind. That was metal striking wood. Rhythmic. Repetitive. Judith stepped forward, clutching her pearls as if they were a rosary. You are imagining things. You are hysterical, just like Chloe said you would be. This is exactly why she needs space. I looked at the three of them, Judith the gatekeeper, Richard the warden, and his sister at the table, the silent witness. They were a phalanx of gaslighting. They were banking on social contract theory, the idea that a polite older woman would rather leave than cause a scene at a dinner party. They forgot that I spent 3 decades tearing apart CEOs in boardrooms. I am not polite. I am persistent. I am going to give you 2 choices, Richard, I said, reaching into my purse. I saw his muscles tense. He thought I was reaching for a weapon. I pulled out my phone. Choice A, I continued, holding the screen up so he could see my thumb, hovering over the emergency call button. I call 911 right now and report a potential domestic disturbance and request a welfare check. The police will arrive in 5 minutes. They will interrupt your lovely roast beef. They will knock on every door. Richard's smirk vanished. His eyes darted to the window, then to his mother. He didn't want the police. Not yet, Choice B, I said, you step aside. I go upstairs. I see my daughter with my own eyes. If she tells me to my face to leave, I will leave. And I won't come back. It was a lie, of course. I would never leave her here, but Richard was arrogant. He believed he had broken her enough that she would say whatever he wanted her to say. He weighed the options. Police meant loss of control. Letting me up meant a managed risk. He stepped aside. He did it with a mock bow, sweeping his arm toward the stairs. Be my guest, he sneered. But if you wake her up and she starts screaming at you, don't say I didn't warn you. I walked past him. I didn't run. I walked with the steady measured tread of an auditor walking toward a non-compliant file cabinet. The air grew cooler as I climbed the stairs. The warmth of the dinner party faded, replaced by a sterile silent chill. The master bedroom was at the end of the hall. The door was open. I glanced inside. The bed was made. Perfectly made. Not a pillow out of place. No one was sleeping there. I turned to the guest room, the small room that faced the backyard. The room with the smallest windows. The door was closed. I walked toward it. The hallway carpet dampened my footsteps. I reached for the handle. It was a round brass knob. Standard. But above it, installed clumsily into the expensive molding, was a heavy-duty deadbolt. A deadbolt. On the outside of a bedroom door. I froze. My forensic brain started snapping pictures. Data point 1. Locks changed downstairs. Data point 2. Deadbolt installed on interior door. Data point 3. The silence. Why is there a deadbolt on the guest room, Richard? I asked without turning around. I could feel him standing at the top of the stairs behind me. We're renovating, he said smoothly. Contractors. Valuable tools inside. We keep it locked. You said she was sleeping, I said. Is she sleeping with the power tools? She's in the den, he corrected quickly. Too quickly. Liars struggle with consistency when the pressure ramps up. I told you she's restless. She moves around. I put my ear to the door. I heard breathing. Shallow, ragged breathing, and then a small involuntary whimper. Chloe, I called out. The whimpering stopped. It was replaced by a sudden, terrified stillness. Go away, a voice whispered. It sounded like Chloe but thin. Strained, like it was being squeezed out of a tube. Please. Just go away, she said. Go away, Richard said. His voice triumphant. You heard her. Now leave. I turned to face him. Open this door. No, Richard said. He crossed his arms. It's her privacy. She asked for it. She didn't ask to be locked in from the outside, I snapped. It's for her safety, Judith called from the bottom of the stairs. She sleepwalks. She tries to wander off. We are keeping her safe. Safety. The favorite word of the tyrant. I looked at the deadbolt. I looked at Richard. I looked at the heavy brass vase sitting on the hallway console table next to me. I am going to count to 3, I said. If you do not unlock this door, I am going to take that vase and put it through the window of your BMW downstairs, and the noise will definitely wake the neighbors. Richard's nostrils flared. You wouldn't dare. I am a 60-year-old widow with a spotless record, and a very good lawyer, I said. Try me. I picked up the vase. It was heavy. Solid bronze. 1, I said. Richard didn't move. 2, I said, shifting the weight of the vase to my throwing arm. Fine, Richard snarled. He fished a key ring out of his pocket. A single silver key dangled from it. He marched over, snatched the vase from my hand, and shoved the key into the deadbolt. Click. He threw the door open. See, he spat. She's fine. She's resting. Happy now, you old hag? I stepped into the room. It was dark. The curtains were drawn and pinned shut. The air smelled stale like sweat and rubbing alcohol. My eyes adjusted to the gloom. I saw the outline of a bed. I saw a figure lying on it. Chloe, I whispered. She didn't sit up. She didn't reach for me. She turned her head slowly on the pillow. Mom, she slurred. I hit the light switch. The room flooded with harsh overhead light, and my heart, which had been beating a steady rhythm of anger for the last hour, stopped cold in my chest. Chloe wasn't just sleeping. She was strapped down. Thick leather restraints bound her wrists to the bed frame. A heavy chain, the source of the metallic clink, was looped around her ankle and padlocked to the radiator pipe. Her face was pale. Her eyes were dilated pupils that swallowed the iris, and her cheek, her beautiful left cheek, was a swollen bloom of purple and yellow bruises. I stood there, paralyzed by the horror of the data. This wasn't a marriage problem. This wasn't a mental health crisis. This was a hostage situation, and the hostage taker was standing right behind me. The human brain has a fail-safe mechanism for trauma. It tries to reject what the eyes are seeing. It tries to say this is a movie. This is a nightmare. This is not your little girl. My brain tried to tell me that the leather straps were medical equipment, that the chain was a mistake, but then I looked at Chloe's wrist. The skin was raw and red where she had fought against the leather. This wasn't therapy. This was torture. I didn't scream. Screaming burns energy, and I needed every ounce of fuel I had. I rushed to the bed. I put my hand on Chloe's forehead. She was burning up. Her skin was clammy. Chloe, I whispered, fumbling with the buckle on her wrist. Baby, I'm here. Wake up, she groaned. Her eyelids fluttered, but the pupils remained blown wide, swallowing the blue iris I knew so well. Don't touch those, Richard barked from the doorway. He didn't sound scared anymore. He sounded authoritative. You are disrupting her treatment. I spun around. The fury that rose in me was so cold, it felt like liquid nitrogen. Treatment, I asked, my voice trembling with the effort to keep it steady. You have her chained to a radiator, Richard. You have beaten her face. I didn't touch her. Richard threw his hands up, looking at his mother for support. She did that to herself. She gets violent, Beatrice. She tries to hurt herself. We had to restrain her to keep her from banging her head against the wall. He's right, Judith chimed in, stepping into the room and wrinkling her nose at the smell. It's for her own good. We are saving her from herself. I turned back to the restraints. My fingers were shaking, but I managed to undo the buckle on her right wrist. Chloe's arm flopped onto the mattress like dead weight. Richard took a step forward. I said, leave her alone. I pulled my phone out again. I didn't threaten this time. I dialed 911, I said clearly, staring Richard in the eye. Address is 4400 Hillside Drive. I am reporting a hostage situation. A woman is being held against her will, physically restrained with chains, and shows signs of severe physical assault. The perpetrator is in the room. Richard didn't lunge for the phone. He didn't run. He just straightened his blazer. He exchanged a look with his mother, a look that chilled me to the bone. Go ahead, Richard said, crossing his arms. Call them. We have nothing to hide. It took 8 minutes for the police to arrive. Those 8 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat on the bed, shielding Chloe's body with my own. Then blue lights flashed through the heavy curtains. I heard the heavy thud of boots on the stairs. Police! Anybody here? Upstairs, I yelled. In the bedroom. 2 officers burst into the room. One was young, hand on his holster. The other was older, a sergeant with tired eyes. They took in the scene instantly. The dark room. The smell. The woman on the bed with a chain around her ankle. Hands, the young officer shouted at Richard. Let me see your hands. Richard raised his hands slowly. I'm the husband. Thank God you're here. My mother-in-law has broken into our home and is interfering with a volatile patient. Ma'am, step away from the bed, the sergeant ordered me. She is not a patient, I snapped, standing up but keeping my hands visible. She is a prisoner. Look at the chain. Look at her face. The sergeant stepped closer. He shone his flashlight on the padlock, securing the chain to the radiator. He looked at the bruises on Chloe's face. His jaw tightened. "Get the key," the sergeant said to Richard. His voice was hard. "Now, officer, please understand," Richard began. "Unlock it, or I break it, and arrest you for unlawful imprisonment." Richard's composure cracked for a second. He fumbled in his pocket, produced the key, and unlocked the padlock. The chain rattled to the floor. "Ma'am?" The sergeant shone the light in Chloe's eyes. "Can you tell me your name?" Chloe blinked against the light. She looked at Richard. I saw her shrink. I saw the terror flare in her drugged eyes. "Chloe," she whispered. "My name is Chloe. Did he do this to you?" the sergeant asked. Chloe opened her mouth. Her eyes darted to Richard. He wasn't looking at her. He was holding up his phone. "Officer," Richard said, his voice loud, "before you continue questioning a sedated patient, you need to speak to this." He held out the phone. It was on speaker. "This is Leonard Graves, attorney at law." A sharp voice came from the speaker. "Who am I speaking with?" The sergeant frowned. "Sergeant Miller." "SCPD Sergeant Miller," the lawyer's voice was crisp. "My client's wife is currently under a Stage 1 involuntary psychiatric hold, signed by Dr. Aris this afternoon at 4 p.m. She is considered a danger to herself and others. Mr. Vance is her court-appointed medical proxy." Richard pulled a document from a binder on the dresser and handed it to the sergeant. "It's an involuntary hold," Richard said smoothly. "She tried to jump off the balcony this morning. The restraints were applied under doctor's orders, pending transfer to a secure facility tomorrow." The sergeant read the paper. He looked frustrated. "This says soft restraints," the sergeant said. "You had her in chains." "We ran out of straps," Richard lied easily. "It was an emergency measure to save her life. If you remove her from this house, Sergeant, and she harms herself in your custody, my client will sue the department for negligence, and I will personally ensure your badge is on the settlement agreement." The sergeant looked at me. He looked at the bruised woman on the bed. He knew something was wrong. But he also knew he was holding a legal grenade. "She has bruises," I argued, desperate. "That isn't self-harm." "She bangs her head," Richard said with a tragic sigh. "We try to stop her. It's heartbreaking." The sergeant lowered the paper. He looked at Richard with pure disgust. "Get rid of the chain," the sergeant said. "If I come back and see metal on her again, I don't care what your lawyer says, you're going for a ride." "Understood," Richard nodded. "Soft restraints only." "And you?" the sergeant turned to me. "Ma'am, you need to leave. You can't leave her here," I screamed. "He is killing her." "Ma'am, he has a signed psychiatric order. If I take her, I'm violating a medical directive. It's a civil matter now. You need to call Adult Protective Services in the morning. In the morning, she could be dead." "Ma'am." The sergeant stepped between me and the bed. "You are trespassing. Do not make me arrest you in front of your daughter. Go. Fight it in court tomorrow." I looked at the bedroom door. Chloe was in there, drugged and defenseless. I could fight. I could get arrested. But if I was in jail, I couldn't audit the accounts. I couldn't find the money trail. That would prove Richard wasn't a concerned husband, but a thief. I needed to be smart. I needed to be Beatrice the auditor. "Fine," I said. My voice was cold. "I'm leaving." I walked to the door. I turned back to Richard. He was smiling. It was a small, victorious smile. "Goodbye, Beatrice," he said. "Don't drive too fast." I walked down the stairs. I walked out the front door. But as I walked to my car, my brain wasn't screaming anymore. It was calculating. Richard had made a mistake. A fatal mistake. He had shown me the binder to get the psychiatric papers. And in that binder, underneath the forged medical forms, I had seen the edge of another document. It was a bank statement. A statement from a bank in the Cayman Islands. Richard wasn't just abusing her. He was laundering her money. And that was a language I spoke fluently. I sat in my car at the end of their driveway. The engine was idling, but I couldn't bring myself to put it in gear. I watched the house. The blue lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance, leaving only the silence of the suburbs. I saw the light in the guest room window go dark. Richard had turned it off. He was back in control. My hands gripped the steering wheel, so tight the leather squeaked. A primal scream was building in my throat, a mother's howl of grief and rage. I wanted to drive my car through their front door. I wanted to burn the house down. But I forced myself to swallow the scream. I forced myself to breathe, inhale, data, exhale, strategy. If I acted like a hysterical mother, Richard won. He had the paperwork. He had the calm demeanor. He had the narrative. To beat him, I couldn't be emotional. I had to be what he feared most. An auditor. I put the car in drive. I didn't go to the police station. I didn't go to a lawyer. I went home to my war room. My home office is not a cozy space. It is a sterile environment with 3 monitors, a shredder, and a high-speed server. It is where I spent 30 years tracking embezzlers, fraudsters, and corporate thieves. I sat down at 2 a.m. I didn't make tea. I poured a glass of whiskey neat and cracked my knuckles. Okay, Richard the First whispered to the glowing screens. Let's see who you really are. I started with the basics. Public records. Richard liked to brag about his company, Vantage Point Developments. He claimed they were building luxury condos in the city. I pulled up the corporate filings. Vantage Point was an LLC, registered in Delaware, standard for hiding ownership. But he had been sloppy. He listed his mother's address as the registered agent. I ran a UC Lean search. The screen filled with red. Lean. Granite Suppliers Incorporated. 45,000 unpaid. Lean. Metro Electric. 12,000 unpaid. Judgment. City of Los Angeles. 85,000 for code violations. Richard wasn't a developer. He was a debtor. He was bleeding money. But that was just small potatoes. Men like Richard can juggle contractor debt for years. I needed to know why he was desperate enough to chain his wife to a radiator now. I thought back to the binder. The Cayman Islands bank statement. Meridian Trust. Why would a failed local developer have an offshore account? I needed access. I knew Richard's passwords, not because I am a hacker, but because Richard is a narcissist. Narcissists always use passwords related to their own greatness. I tried his email. Richard Vance 1. Incorrect. Big Rich 88. Incorrect. Vantage Point 1. Incorrect. Then I remembered the wedding. He had insisted on a specific date for the ceremony because it was the day he closed his first $1 million deal, NOV 12 million. Access granted. I didn't smile. I just started downloading. I sifted through his emails. It was a sewer of desperation. Notices from credit card companies, angry emails from investors, and then a thread from a user named Mr. K. The subject line was simply, "Deadline." I opened it. Mr. Vance. Your extension is denied. The principal plus interest, total 2.4 million, is due by the 1st of the month. If funds are not transferred, we will proceed with asset recovery. Physical collateral will be collected. The email was dated 3 days ago. The 1st of the month was in 4 days. I froze. Physical collateral, that wasn't banking terminology. That was loan shark terminology. Richard wasn't just broke. He was a dead man walking. He had borrowed money from organized crime to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford, probably banking on his big break that never came, and now they were coming to collect. This explained everything. The sudden isolation, the medical control, the forged power of attorney. He needed Chloe's trust fund, but there was a catch. Chloe's trust established by my late husband was ironclad. It had a spendthrift clause. Chloe could only access the principal for specific reasons, medical emergencies, buying a primary residence, or if she was incapacitated. If Chloe was declared mentally incompetent, her guardian Richard, thanks to the forged power of attorney, could petition the trustee to release funds for her care. He wasn't trying to cure her. He was trying to drive her insane. He was drugging her, isolating her, and documenting episodes to build a case for permanent incompetence. Once he had that, he could drain the trust, pay off Mr. K, and leave Chloe rotting in a facility somewhere. I looked at the date on the email again. For days, he was running out of time. That meant he was going to make a move. He couldn't wait for a court to certify her incompetence. That takes months. He needed cash now. I sat back in my chair. The whiskey burned in my throat. I had enough evidence to start a fraud investigation. But investigations take time. The FBI takes weeks to issue subpoenas. Richard had 4 days. If he felt cornered, if he realized he couldn't get the money legally, what would he do to Chloe? He might decide that a grieving widower gets the money faster than a guardian. I couldn't just report him. I had to destroy him. I had to make sure that when he walked into that bank, he wasn't walking out with money. He was walking into a cage. I looked at the Cayman logo again. I picked up my phone. It was 4 a.m. I dialed a number I hadn't used since my firm investigated a cartel money laundering scheme in Miami. Hello, a groggy voice answered. Beatrice? Is everything okay? Wake up, Simon, I said. I need you to trace a shell company, and I need you to do it in the next hour. Beatrice, I'm retired, Simon groaned. So am I said. But my daughter is married to a man who owes $2 million to the mob, and I intend to make sure he pays it. Just not with money. I started typing. The audit had begun. There is a saying in the accounting world. Numbers don't lie, but liars use numbers. Richard thought he was a genius because he could forge a signature and bully a wife. But he forgot that every dollar leaves a footprint. And he certainly forgot that he was up against a woman who used to hunt cartel money for sport. He thought he was hiding his tracks. He didn't realize he was walking in fresh snow. And I was the wolf following the scent. The sun came up over my garden, but I didn't see it. I had been staring at my monitors for 5 hours. My eyes burned, but my mind was crystalline. Simon, my old contact, had come through. He had sent me a dossier at 4:30 a.m. that painted a picture of a man drowning in his own hubris. Richard's financial life was a Ponzi scheme of one. He had 3 mortgages on the house Chloe paid for. He had maxed out 6 credit cards in Chloe's name. He had borrowed $200,000 from his mother Judith, which explained why she was so desperate to keep him afloat. If he went down, her retirement went down with him. But the most damning evidence was the flow of cash to Mr. K. I traced the wire transfers. Every month for the last year, Richard had been sending $10,000 to a shell company called Kratos Holdings. Simon's note attached to the file was brief. Kratos is a front for the Albanian mob in Chicago, loan sharking. High interest. They don't sue for non-payment, they break kneecaps. I did the math. The $2.4 million deadline mentioned in the email wasn't a random number. It was a balloon payment. Richard had borrowed big to fund a development project that the city shut down for code violations. The interest had compounded. The shark was tired of waiting. If Richard didn't pay by the first 3 days from now, he wasn't going to jail. He was going to a landfill. This terrified me. A desperate man is a dangerous man. If he realized he couldn't access Chloe's main trust fund quickly enough through legal channels, he might try something drastic. He might try to kidnap her, or worse, he might decide that a life insurance payout was faster than a competency hearing. I checked the terms of Chloe's life insurance policy. $5 million, my blood ran cold. I needed to get her out of that house. Today. But I couldn't just storm in again. The police had made it clear. Richard had the paperwork. If I went back, I would be arrested and Chloe would be left alone with a man facing a death sentence from the mob. I needed to lure him out. I needed to make him bring Chloe to me. I looked at the bank statements again. I looked at the trust fund documents. The main trust was locked down tight. The trustee was a conservative bank that required board approval for withdrawals over $50,000. That process took weeks. Richard didn't have weeks. I needed to invent a miracle for him. I opened a new document on my computer. I pulled up an old template I used to use for high net worth clients. I began to type account statement. The Sentinel Legacy Fund. Beneficiary. Chloe Elizabeth Vance. Current balance. $3.25 million. Status. Maturing. Immediate liquidation available. I created a fake offshore account. I made it look legitimate. I added watermarks. I added a clause that said the funds were blind assets, left by her father separate from the main trust, intended for emergency liquidity. But then I added the trap security protocol. Biometric verification required. The beneficiary must appear in person at the designated vault partner to provide fingerprint authentication for release of funds. I set the designated vault partner as First City Bank downtown, the branch where the manager, Susan, was my bridge partner on Tuesdays. I printed the document. It looked perfect. It looked like salvation. Now I had to deliver the bait. I couldn't just email it to him. He wouldn't believe it coming from me. I had to make him think he discovered it. I picked up my phone. I unblocked Richard's number. I waited until 8 a.m. Then I called him. He answered on the second ring. Well, Richard's voice was smug, but I heard the underlying tension. If it isn't the trespasser. Calling to apologize? I'm calling to negotiate, Richard, I said. My voice sounded tired. Broken, I spoke to a lawyer. He said your power of attorney is ironclad. He said I can't win. Richard let out a breath, finally. You're seeing reason. Chloe is sick, Beatrice. I'm just trying to help her. I know I lied. I just want her to be taken care of. Look, Richard. I'm going to back off. But there is something you need to know. Something her father set up that I completely forgot about until I was going through old files last night. What are you talking about? His interest peaked instantly. There was a secondary account, I said. A legacy fund. Her father didn't want it included in the main trust because of taxes. It was supposed to be a surprise for her 30th birthday, but, well, given the medical bills you must have. How much? Richard interrupted. The greed in his voice was so thick I could taste it. $3 million, I said. Give or take. Silence. I could hear his brain calculating. $3 million would pay off Mr. K and leave him with $600,000 to play with. Where is it? He demanded. It's at First City Bank, I said. But Richard, it's complicated. It's a biometric account. It requires her thumbprint to open, and since she's unwell, I didn't know if she could travel. She can travel, Richard said immediately. She's having a good day today. She's much better. Oh, I said. Well, that's good, but I have the access codes. I have the paperwork. I can bring them to you. No, Richard shouted. No, you stay away from the house. Send them. Email them to me right now. I can scan them, I said, but Richard, the account has a dormancy clause. If it isn't accessed by the end of this quarter, which is tomorrow, it rolls over into a charitable trust. You'd lose it. Send me the document, Beatrice, Richard hissed. Now, okay, I said. I'm sending it, please. Just use it to help her. Of course, Richard said. I'll take care of everything. He hung up. I smiled at the dead phone. I know you will, Richard, I whispered. I scanned the fake document. I emailed it to him. Then I called Susan at the bank. Susan, I said, I need a favor. A big one. And I need you to call the off-duty police officer you use for security. I'm bringing you a felon. I hit send. I watched the screen. 10 seconds later, the read receipt popped up. Read by Richard Vance at 8:03 a.m. I leaned back in my chair. I could practically hear the gears grinding in his head. He was cross-referencing the account number I had fabricated with his own desperate need for liquidity. He was looking at the biometric requirement and realizing he couldn't just forge a signature this time. He needed Chloe's thumb, which meant he had to drag her out of that house. He had to bring her into the light. My phone rang at 8:05 a.m. Beatrice, Richard said. He sounded breathless. Manic, I got the file. This This changes things. I didn't know about the Sentinel Fund. I told you I said, keeping my voice weak and defeated. I forgot. I'm getting old, Richard. My memory isn't what it used to be. It's a lot of money, Richard said. Enough to get her the best care. I can take her to Europe. There are specialists there. He was already spending it. He was already planning his escape. The document says it expires tomorrow, I reminded him. The quarterly rollover. We'll go today, Richard snapped. I'll take her to the First City branch downtown. I'll get her ready now. She's having a lucid morning. It shouldn't be a problem. Good, I said. I'll email the bank manager, Susan, to expect you. I'll tell her to prepare the VIP room so Chloe isn't overwhelmed by the crowds. Yes, Richard said. Privacy is key. We don't want people staring at her. She looks tired. I'll handle it, I said. Just get her there by 10 a.m. I hung up. I didn't email Susan. I drove to the bank. Susan has been managing my accounts for 20 years. She knows about my past as a forensic auditor. She also knows Chloe. She was at the wedding. She saw the bruises on Chloe's arm that she tried to hide with makeup 6 months ago. I sat in Susan's glass-walled office at 9 a.m. I laid the dossier on her desk. The dossier contained everything: the fake Sentinel Fund document, the real emails from the loan shark Mr. K, threatening bodily harm, the trace analysis of the forged power of attorney, the Cayman Island bank statements showing he was siphoning Chloe's current funds. He's coming here at 10, I told her. He is bringing my daughter against her will. He intends to use her thumbprint to access a fictional account. When that fails, he will try to access her real trust fund using the forged power of attorney. Susan looked at the loan shark emails. Her face went pale. Beatrice, she whispered, this man is dangerous. He owes $2 million to the mob? He's a cornered rat, I said, and he's using my daughter as a shield. What do you want me to do? Susan asked. I need you to play along, I said. When he arrives, take them to the vault conference room, the one with no windows. Tell him the system is processing the biometric data. Stall him, and then I said, I walk in. Beatrice, you need the police, Susan warned. We have an off-duty officer in the lobby, but if this man is desperate. I called Detective Miller, I said, the one from the fraud squad I used to work with. He is parking his unmarked car around the back right now. He's bringing a team. Susan nodded. She picked up her phone to alert security. I checked my watch. 9:15 a.m. I had one more call to make. A dangerous call. I picked up the burner phone I had bought at a gas station on the way over. I looked at the number in the footer of the loan shark's email. In case of emergency 555-0199, I dialed. Yeah? A voice answered. Heavy. Gravelly, Mr. K, I said. I didn't wait for him to ask who I was. You are looking for Richard Vance. Silence on the line. Then, who is this? An interested party, I said. Richard is attempting to flee the country. He is currently heading to First City Bank downtown to liquidate his wife's assets. He plans to take the cash and run to Europe. Is that so? The voice growled. He has a flight booked for tonight, I lied. If you want your $2 million, I suggest you meet him at the bank. There is a moment in every predator's life when they realize they are no longer the hunter. It isn't a gradual realization. It is sudden. It is the moment the gazelle turns around and bares teeth. Richard thought he was running toward freedom. He thought he was escaping a nagging mother-in-law and a bank manager. He didn't know that I hadn't just called the police. I had called the consequences. Richard kicked the heavy steel door open. The alarm shrieked, a piercing mechanical scream that echoed in the narrow alleyway behind the bank. He dragged Chloe out into the daylight. She stumbled, her legs tangling in her scarf. He yanked her up by her arm, his grip bruising. Move, he screamed at her. We need a car. Move. He looked left. He looked right. He was expecting an open road. He was expecting a taxi. What he found was a black SUV blocking the north exit of the alley, and a sedan blocking the south. 3 men stood by the SUV. They weren't wearing uniforms. They were wearing leather jackets. One of them was leaning against the hood, cleaning his fingernails with a small knife. Richard froze. His momentum died instantly. He knew those faces. I could see the recognition dawn on him through the open door where I stood. With the police, it was the collection agency, the unregulated kind. Mr. Vance, the man with the knife, called out. His voice was casual, almost friendly. "You're late." "Mr. K doesn't like late." Richard took a step back. He looked wild. He looked at the mobsters. Then he heard the heavy boots of the SWAT team pounding down the hallway behind him. He was trapped in the corridor of his own bad decisions. Behind him, the law. Prison. In front of him, the debt. A shallow grave. The man with the knife took a step forward. He didn't look at Chloe. He looked only at Richard. "We heard you were leaving the country," the man said, "with our collateral." "No," Richard shouted, his voice cracking. "No, I have the money. I just need time." "Time's up," the man said. At that moment, Detective Miller burst through the door past me, his service weapon leveled at Richard's back. "Police! Drop the hostage! Get on the ground!" Richard looked at the police gun. Then he looked at the mobster's knife. A frantic calculation happened in his eyes. He realized that the police were no longer his enemy. They were his sanctuary. A prison cell was the only place on earth safe from the men standing 10 feet away. "I surrender," Richard screamed. He shoved Chloe away from him so hard she fell onto the asphalt. He threw his hands in the air. "Officer! Arrest me! Take me in! Please!" He ran toward the police. He practically dove onto the pavement, offering his wrists for the handcuffs. "Protect me," Richard sobbed as Miller kneeled on his back. "Don't let them take me. You have to protect me." The mobsters watched. The man with the knife shrugged, put the blade away, and got back into the SUV. They didn't need to do anything. They knew where he was going, and they knew that debts follow you, even into federal prison. I ran past the officers. I ran to the heap of fabric on the ground. "Chloe," I gasped, dropping to my knees on the dirty alley floor. She was shaking violently. The scarf had fallen off. The sunlight hit her face, illuminating the bruises in stark relief. She looked up at me, her eyes struggling to focus. "B," she whispered. "I've got you," I said, pulling her into my lap. "It's over. The audit is closed." He wanted my thumb," she mumbled, looking at her hand. "He tried to cut it." I smoothed her hair. "He isn't going to touch you ever again." I looked up. Officers were hauling Richard to the cruiser. He was still screaming about protective custody. Then I saw Judith. She had followed them out the back door, clutching her tote bag. She stood there frozen, watching her son being shoved into the back of a police car. She saw me looking at her. She tried to turn back into the bank, to slip away into the crowd. "Officer," I pointed a finger at her. "That woman is an accomplice. Check her bag." Judith's eyes went wide. "No, I didn't know. I'm just his mother." Detective Miller signaled 2 uniformed officers. They approached her. "Ma'am, let me see the bag." "You can't do this," Judith shrieked as they took the bag. "I am a member of the country club. I have high blood pressure." The officer opened the bag. He pulled out a roll of duct tape, a set of plastic zip ties, and 3 passports. Judith wilted. "Cuff her," Miller said. I watched them both go, the mother and the son, the gatekeeper and the warden. I held my daughter in the alleyway, and I finally let myself cry. Not tears of sadness, tears of relief, but I wasn't done. Arresting him wasn't enough. I needed to make sure he never saw the light of day again. The emergency room at St. Luke's is a place of chaos, but to me it felt like the only sane place in the world. Here injuries were treated, not inflicted. Here sedatives were given to heal, not to control. I stood by the bed while the nurses worked. They cleaned the raw skin on Chloe's ankles. They photographed the bruising on her face. They took blood samples to determine exactly what cocktail of drugs Richard had been feeding her to keep her compliant. Benzodiazepines and heavy antipsychotics, the doctor told me, looking at the preliminary tox screen. Enough to knock out a horse. It's a miracle she could walk at all. He was building a case for incompetence, I said, my voice flat. He needed her pliable so he could hold the pen for her. I stepped into the hallway. Detective Miller was waiting for me. He held a cup of bad hospital coffee and the heavy binder I had thrown onto the table at the bank. We denied bail, Miller said. Flight risk. Plus he screamed for protective custody, so loud the judge probably heard him without a phone call. He's terrified of whoever was in that SUV. Good, I said. Keep him terrified. Beatrice, Miller tapped the binder. I looked through this. The Cayman accounts. The forged medical directives. This is thorough. I was a forensic accountant for 30 years, detective, I said. I don't do rough drafts. There is one thing, Miller said. The mother, Judith, we booked her for accessory to kidnapping and possession of burglary tools, but she's lawyered up. She claims she was a victim too, that she was just trying to help and didn't know about the abuse. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. Open the binder to tab 4, I said. Miller flipped the pages. I traced the money, I explained. Richard stole $200,000 from Chloe's primary checking account 6 months ago. He transferred it to a shell company called Blue Heron LLC. Okay, Miller said. Look at who owns Blue Heron, I said. Miller read the document. Judith Vance, exactly, I said. Richard stole the money from his wife, sent it to his mother's shell company, and then Judith loaned it back to Richard so he could pay his mortgage. She wasn't an innocent bystander, detective. She was the laundromat. Miller let out a low whistle. That's money laundering. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. She's not just an accessory, I said. She's a partner. Seize her assets, her house, her car, her pension. It's all proceeds of crime. Miller closed the binder. He looked at me with a mixture of respect and fear. Remind me never to make you angry, Beatrice. Just do your job, detective, I said. I've already done mine. I walked back into the room. Chloe was awake. The fluids were flushing the drugs out of her system. Her eyes were clearer, the pupils returning to normal size. She looked at me. She looked at the handcuffs on the bed rail that the officer had left there by mistake. She flinched. Is he gone? She whispered. He is in a concrete box, I said, sitting beside her. And he is going to stay there for a very long time. And his mother is in the cell next to him. Chloe closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her bruised cheek. I tried to tell you, she whispered. With the text. I tried to warn you. I know, I said, taking her hand. But you forgot one thing about your mother, Chloe. What? I don't take warnings, I said. I take inventory. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again. I pulled it out. It was a text from an unknown number. Subject is in custody. We know where he is housed. Interest is still accruing. K. I deleted the message. Richard thought he was safe in jail. He thought the police were his shield. But he forgot that in prison, debts are traded like cigarettes, and Mr. K was a very patient creditor. I looked at my daughter. She was broken, yes. But she was alive. She was solvent. And she was free. The audit was complete. The deficit had been identified and removed. Now it was time to rebuild the capital. In the world of finance, the final step of an audit is called the closing conference. It is where the auditor sits down with the management, lays out the findings, and demands corrective action. But in life, corrective action doesn't always mean a fine. Sometimes it means a cage, and sometimes, if you are really lucky, it means watching the people who thought they were untouchable realize that they are actually insolvent. 6 months have passed since I pulled my daughter out of that bank vault. Recovery is slow. Chloe has nightmares. She flinches when doors slam, but she is seeing a therapist who specializes in coercive control, and she is starting to wear bright colors again. The bruises on her face have faded, but the steel in her spine is forging itself anew. As for the Vance family enterprise, the liquidation was total. The trial was brief. Faced with the mountain of evidence I provided, the Cayman statements, the forged medical directives, the emails to the loan shark, Richard's lawyer advised him to take a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to kidnapping, wire fraud, and aggravated assault. He was sentenced to 25 years in a federal penitentiary. But the real show was Judith. Judith tried to turn on her son. She claimed she was a terrified old woman. bullied into helping him. She cried on the stand. She clutched her pearls. But I had the receipts. I had the bank transfers showing her Blue Heron LLC taking Chloe's money. I had the emails where she instructed Richard on how to keep Chloe quiet during the dinner party. The judge wasn't moved by her tears. He called her the architect of a domestic prison. She got 12 years. I went to the auction house yesterday. The government seized Judith's assets to pay restitution to the victims, specifically to pay back the money stolen from Chloe's trust. I stood in the back of the room and watched Judith's antique furniture, her Mercedes, and yes, even her pearls, get sold to the highest bidder. I bought the pearls myself, not to wear. I gave them to Chloe. She keeps them in a jar on her desk as a trophy, a reminder that the woman who tried to silence her is now the one who has to raise her hand for permission to speak. But the most satisfying part of the settlement wasn't the prison sentences, it was the debt. Richard is currently housed in a medium-security facility in Terre Haute. He requested protective custody because of the threats from the Chicago mob. He thinks he is safe behind walls. Last week I received a letter. It was from Richard. It was desperate. Scrawled on prison stationery, Beatrice. Please. You have to help me. They found me. There are guys in here. Friends of Mr. K. They say the debt has transferred. They want payment. I can't pay them. I have nothing. Send me money for the commissary. Send me something to pay for protection. I am begging you. I am your family. I read the letter at my kitchen table. Chloe was sitting across from me drinking tea. She looked healthy. She looked free. What is it? She asked. Just a bill, I said. From a vendor we no longer use. I handed her the letter. She read it. Her hands didn't shake. He wants money for protection, she said flatly. He does, I said. Apparently Mr. K has a long reach. Interest accrues even in lockdown. Chloe looked at the letter. Then she looked at me. Do we have any obligation to pay this? She asked using the accounting term I had taught her. None, I said. It is a sunk cost. She stood up. She walked to the shredder in the corner of my office, the same shredder I used to destroy Richard's lies. She fed the letter into the machine. Richard's plea for help turned into confetti. Account closed, Chloe said. We walked out to the garden. It was spring. The tulips were pushing through the soil, resilient and colorful after a hard winter. You know, Mom, Chloe said, linking her arm through mine. I used to hate that you were an auditor. I thought you were cold. I thought you only cared about rules. Auditors aren't cold, Chloe, I said, patting her hand. We just believe that everything has to balance. Debits on the left. Credits on the right. Well, Chloe smiled, tilting her face to the sun. I think the books are finally balanced. Yes, I agreed. They are. Richard is in a cell, looking over his shoulder every time the cell block opens. Judith is in a prison laundry room, ruining her manicure, and Mr. K is. Well, he is managing his investments, and me? I am Beatrice. I am a mother. And I am retired, unless, of course, I see a discrepancy. And that, ladies, is how you close a file. It is a terrifying thing to realize that the people who claim to protect us are sometimes the ones building the cage. But Beatrice taught us that we don't have to be victims, we just have to be observant. We have to look for the data points, the changed locks, the hushed conversations, the bank accounts that don't add up. And most importantly, we have to trust our gut. If your daughter texts you something that doesn't sound like her, don't just text back. Go there. Break the door down. Bring the bronze vase. Because a mother's intuition is the most powerful forensic tool on earth. What about you? Have you ever had a feeling about a family member that turned out to be right? Did you intervene? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And remember, if you enjoyed seeing Richard get audited, hit that like button, stay safe, stay sharp, and keep your receipts.